about 13 years now. Although he's a lawyer, we don't hold that against him. He has actually been inducted as an honorary safety professional with the agency National Safety Committee a couple of years ago. So he does wonderful things for our community, and I'm sure he'll give us some great tidbits of advice today.
Thanks, brother. Well, I know what all of you are, and don't worry, I'm confident that the Braves can still pull it out. So it's cool, guys. I mean, keep praying for the Braves. Oh wait, I'm sorry. You feel differently. So I'm a true baseball fan, and do you know it would cost me less to fly to Houston and buy ticket scalping than to buy ticket scalping in Atlanta? It is that out of control. So I've decided watching a ball game on a TV screen is really just a great idea, frankly, with this series, a lot of alcohol. So a few things. First, am I being recorded?
Yes.
All right, I'll behave. So, you asked me to give you an update on Biden, but if you want me to engage in intelligent speculation at some point on the OSHA ETS, on the legal resolutions between Texas and these standards on government contractors, I can. Likewise, for various reasons, I'm keeping up very much with this New Mexico shooting on the set of Rust, which, aside from being fascinating, is an incredible learning example for all of us, because the word FUBAR is not going to be adequate to describe the failings in their safety programs. And I think I'm going to write an article, maybe do a webinar on it, because it's juicy, but truthfully, changing to construction and move away from prop guns to certain fall protection, erection, or trenching issues. And you can see how if you really set out to get sued and get in trouble, they have followed a very good pathway. Also, I don't know how many of you recently saw it, but the every 4-year ranking of Texas barbecue did recently come out in Texas Monthly. We have offices in Dallas and Houston, and it has promoted much anger and debate. On the other hand, we have all kinds of bets throughout our system with Dallas and Houston. And I'm really happy to know that in all cases we have demanded the Texas side to bet be barbecue. We are not fools in Atlanta. Your state as a whole blows us out of the water on barbecue. Now, I think the city of Kansas City gives some run for money. Kind of New Memphis is more posters. But in any event, God bless Texas barbecue. Other weird little factoid, so that you don't speak too ill about him, is I went to law school. Our class was 120 people, and you got to know everybody really well. One of my classmates was a guy named Greg Abbott, so I'm kind of protective of the guy because he was not even vaguely political when we were in law school. Good guy, very smart. And, you know, you've heard the story. A few weeks after we graduated, he's out jogging in Houston. Limb had been paralyzed from the waist down. And that's when he started taking interest in politics. So, whether you like Greg or not, I have to be protective of him because I'm a buddy. So, anyway, that's the overview of the side comments and all. Other than a couple of questions. How many, well, don't raise your hand, but did most of you get to hear the servant leadership and the mental health stuff? Let's be honest, a few years ago you would listen to been respectful to that, but I'm not sure you would have really engaged in it. Now, I mean, I was looking, everybody's paying attention. I served on the first federal task force for SARS way back when, and I've served on a lot of them since then. So December, before all hell broke loose, I started saying, I know you're going to say this is, crying wolf and stuff, but this was worrisome. So I met with our management committee. I'm one of the oldest people in the system now. Not oldest, I'm senior, but we've got a 46, 7 officers now. I said, we need our own plan. And by March, it was obvious it was going to be a problem. And people are just beat up. I mean, I don't know a better explanation. My wife's an administrator of a very large children's hospital system, 12,000, 13,000 employees. best work atmosphere in Georgia and surveys, all that kind of thing. And they have had wholesale retirements of top-level people in their 50s that like what they do, they didn't plan to retire, and they just retired. They're beaten up and in construction. And you know, all the statistics show one thing, is that we just ain't done well for the last couple of years. And when I was predicting about this, by the time it was obvious, you know, in February, March, we were going to have a problem, I said, this is going to be something 10 years from now, your employees are going to look back and they're going to say one or two things. You know, I got to give them a boss credit. They did their best, they tried to take care of us, and that's one of the reasons I'm here. Other folks are going to say, those SOBs didn't give a rat, that's why I quit them, blah, blah, blah. So if there was ever a time for us to get serious about servant leadership, about culture, and about forcing idiot guys to be honest, this is it. Because I mean, come on, man, we could have our foot shot off and we'd go, oh, it's just flesh wound. So I cannot overstate, and to give a little credibility to this, I've had more death cases than any other lawyer handling OSHA in the country, over 600. And many of those were as many as 12 employees involved. So this stuff is good. You know, there's one other shout out. If any of you heard the discussion of incident investigation, the breakout, that was another one that was really good. So anyway, thanks for setting the bar high for me. Oh, I can't see that. Are you guys able to hear me all right, or do I need to use the mic? Mike back there, okay. Guys, through this back. Because I ain't looking at my coffee. Man's got to have priorities. All right, approach I'm going to take is, instead of telling you the same stuff you've been hearing for a long time.
Howard.
Yes, sir.
There you go.
Hear me better now?
Yes.
There he is. I feel like the lounge lizard. They owe me. Long story, but the IT guys back there, I swear I'll be nice. I don't want to piss them off. If I got a handout on this is so I'm not going to just give you the usual predictions of, oh, we think this, that, and the other. We need to talk about what we're going to do. So, you know, things you already know. OSHA, if you deal regularly with them, particularly here in Texas, has not gotten very politicized so far. I mean, come on, it's OSHA. You don't necessarily expect them to be your buddy, but I gotta tell you, I've had, you know, sometimes some pretty fiery cases, but it still stayed in the road, and I really don't feel, certainly in Texas, federal OSHA has overly politicized. Now, I don't know how long that's going to last, because as you know, we just, you know, on the 26th, had a new head of OSHA finally passed by the Senate. That's Doug Parker. I've known him for many years. He's a good guy, he's honorable, he's smart, but he is a true believer. And he comes from Cal OSHA. I dealt well with him in that setting, but he is going to be pushing for aggressive changes. Whereas till now we've had a sort of just a steward head of OSHA, acting OSHA, Jim Fredericks, with the steelworkers, dealt with him a lot too over the years, and he's just a really good safety professional. So you really have not seen OSHA just start turning into a political animal. And I'm not sure it will going forward, but there is more risk of that now that we do have ahead. The other thing is Marty Walsh, the Secretary of Labor. You know, he managed to head a union and then be mayor of Boston. And at the end of the day, he is a high-level negotiator, deal maker. And it is instructive that when the OSHA ETS was announced, I know for a fact the highest people in OSHA got less than 24 hours notice. The overwhelming majority of the agency literally heard that press release and was going, what? So again, we'll see what happens. But you know, as things go along, it is going to be more challenging to deal with OSHA. And we also know the biggest factor during COVID is OSHA almost shut down on its core safety stuff. Because first, they were already down to their lowest levels in many years, and whether you like OSHA, don't like OSHA, none of us benefit from there being that few people. It drags out inspections, it has crappy inspections come out. They needed more people. And they're getting them in just heavily now. Similarly, the COVID focus during the beginning of it, I had death cases where OSHA didn't come on site, which is unheard of. And then finally, the fact of remote operation. You know, OSHA is still largely operating remotely except for the area director, assistant area director, and admin in most offices. Meaning that OSHA has not had its A or even its B game. Well, they are in a mass hiring process now, and don't be surprised if you have an inspection if you have 2 when you would have expected 1, even 3 people, and ask, because you may find out 1 or even 2 of them are trainees. And I tell you to ask that because that means you need to maybe approach it a little differently, because when they're training someone, they may dig more, broaden the scope, and frankly be more intrusive than they would if they were just doing their regular inspection, because they're like us, and you don't waste a training opportunity. But that's not how the law is set up. The law is set up that you have to have a scope that is approved, and you can't just broaden it and inspect other things because you want to train someone. Now, in the long run, I think it's probably going to be good to have more people. In the short run, it's going to nuke their quality control. You're going to see citations come out, and I've had this happen. I was in an informal conference in Ohio recently, and the area director instead of the assistant area director did the informal conference, and I started explaining the info on the citations, and he was so angry, he says, this should never have been approved. And he went in and threw everything out, not just the items that were inappropriate, threw the whole thing out, which was his way of letting, not necessarily the compliance officer, but the supervisor know, why did you let this even come to be assigned? And I could have been a jerk and said, well, maybe you should have read it, but it didn't seem like a good idea since the guy was throwing out the whole case. But expect more of that, because again, regardless of what we see OSHA, do at a political level, we know things are going to be effective. Now, I believe in fear. I just enjoy servant leadership, but there is a good thing to have fear. And you need to make sure any supervision under you, any supervisors you work with, any upper management above you have a gracious helping of fear. Because there are a number of trends which could make OSHA penalties extremely unpleasant. The nastiest ones, and none of us knows what's going to come out of this, I don't even know what to call the bill anymore, the Build Back Social Network Bill, etc. There's a provision that has survived all the revisions I've seen that would jack up penalties for things like willful and repeat to as much as $600,000 or $700,000 conceivably, have minimums for just standard serious violations of $100,000 plus. Normally, I would say that's just an add-on. It's not likely to come through. I know AGC National has been apoplectic in dealing with Capitol Hill on it, but I can't guarantee it won't happen. And that is really bad, because right now, this is rhetorical. What are really the 2 main reasons you as an employer are likely really to go to war to fight OSHA citation? I will call them people. Since you were brave enough to look at it, seriously, man, what are the 2, if you're really going to war on OSHA citation, what would be one of the 2 main reasons? And this is assuming you got some merit to it.
Mostly to protect the reputation and salvage or protect our ability to bid work. We don't want a serious citation. And then the second one would be if we feel like it's just out of bounds. And sometimes they're out of bounds, and the area directors are, especially in Dallas, they're a little hesitant to adjust if it's a miswritten citation.
And that, by the way, is increasingly a trend nationwide.
So the only way to fight it is to go ahead and appeal it all the way up, get it to a magistrate, and you got your lawyer talking to an OSHA lawyer who doesn't have time for this crap and is willing to say, okay, pay the penalty and we'll reduce it to other districts.
The point is, you'll note he didn't say penalties. Now, you're part of a huge entity, but more often than not, still, I see these penalties of $9,000, $12,000, $14,000 for an item, maybe two. I mean, it's not like it's no money, but that's nothing compared to damage to bidding ability, to getting into those rating issues. And then sometimes there are civil reasons you feel you need to fight it, but you almost never hear anyone say money. I mean, I cannot tell you the times over 37 years I've had a client tell me, Howard, if they just throw citations out, I will write the full penalty check tomorrow. And that also kind of, you could say, supports OSHA or the Democratic Party's push up penalties. But if we start talking about minimums of $80,000 or $100,000 for serious items, all of a sudden it isn't just going to be a rating issue anymore. Now, the reason I share this is you need to scare people to death. You know, I'm not going to ask for a showing of hands, but I know many of you have been through the appeals process because of OSHA citations, a fatality, higher injury rate than is acceptable, and you've had to go through a very burdensome process, you know, in the form of rating services, or to deal with cities, less so states that have their own requirements. And, you know, it's one thing to talk about OSHA penalties, it's another thing to talk about losing $12, $20, $50 million in contracts, and we all know that's not impossible. So fear is a good thing, and again, this is the sort of thing for people particularly who are supervising their people. They need to know that, number one, we're not joking. We do not want our people hurt, and God knows we don't want anybody killed. Period. End of story. That really is our job. But after that, you need to understand this is the sort of thing that can make us unable to compete, to not have work for our people, you know, basically a whole bunch of bad things. So people need to be aware that if penalties really do jack up like that. Another thing, you may remember under Obama, there was a push to start determining if you were a good federal contractor, looking at things like discrimination claims, OSHA citations, etc. It never really got off the ground, but if you think they're going to pass all this stuff and not have provisions like that linking into government contracting, well, they will. This issue of whistleblowers, we haven't seen it so much yet because, again, you've had people that have been really safety professionals stewarding OSHA. But under Obama, do you remember that for every time you heard preventing fatalities, you would hear 5 references to we've got to get injuries reported more, we've got to improve record keeping, employees are afraid to report lost time injuries. Remember all that? That will come a focus again. And I'll tell you, under the Obama administration, I was fired because I reported an injury type whistleblower claim skyrocketed. And they will, again, certainly we've seen a steady increase, but you can bet it's going to be a lot more as they get new people on because they're also hiring a lot of whistleblower folks. And that's a very common thing, and I want to tell you how a lot of them occur. And I do want to show you of hands on this. How many of you feel really good that on your job sites, your people are consistently writing up, suspending, and otherwise disciplining employees for unsafe work practices and for violating safety rules? How many of you feel like you're just smoking on it? I saw one person say it, which means that you have near divine powers, and I'm proud of you.
Curtis lies.
Pardon?
Curtis lies.
All right. It's Texas. We're in a construction meeting. You've got a lawyer leading it. We all lie. But the common whistleblower claim is, I was injured, I reported this claim, I was fired, it's because the company was trying to cut down on work-related injury reports. So then they will say, you know, only people I'm aware of that have been fired for safety violations are those folks that were injured. So sure enough, I get the documentation, and guess what? It's true. And I tell you, in almost every case, the employer was not in any way retaliated. But it turns out a serious injury was about the only time they really did do a serious root cause or, you know, contributing factor analysis. And honestly, guys, I rarely had a safety violation or an injury where there was not some element of employee contribution. And sometimes it warranted immediate dismissal, other times it warranted warnings or suspensions. But it's always going to be a factor. But you guys know there's a tendency of people, probably less so people in this room because you're more trained, to stop at that point. And the problem is, and this is supervisor training issues, you know, getting your foremen, your superintendents, your assistant superintendents to discipline people for safety violations. Typical method is, I walk up to you, and either cussing or otherwise, I make it clear to you that if you're not tied off or not wearing those safety glasses or whatever again, I'm going to use my boot. And more often than not, let's be honest, that probably works. But that's not formal discipline. So then you get this situation where they're claiming you retaliated, and frankly, evidence looks like you did. And let's go a step further. How many of you guys have ever had to deal with an OSHA citation? All right, I'm going to give OSHA all your names. How many of you business you got to investigate? Let's say a roster. In most of these cases, again, you find employee error. And there is a strong, understandable tendency to want to say, this is not our fault. We did all we could do. The employee was an idiot. Hoping that OSHA will go, why didn't you tell me? It's the idiot defense. Go forth and sin no more. But the problem is there is no such thing. There is something people refer to as the affirmative defense of unpreventable employee misconduct, or actually, sad to say, Cal OSHA has a better definition of it, isolated instance, where you're basically saying we did everything we could and they still acted unwisely. In order to prove that, and this is, by the way, one of the things to write down and remember, it's hard enough to prove, but in the last year, particularly in Texas, when I'm defending employers against citations, OSHA is scrutinizing and using a fine-tooth comb to go through every aspect of that safety program. And in fairness, that's how their judges, the OSHRC judges, look at it. And one of the key factors, and the one that most often kills the defense, is no documented discipline. You will find that you don't have any written discipline. You know people yelling at folks and stuff, but no formal discipline. In fairness, I know a lot of companies who have crews that are super squared away, but still, this is a bad thing. The other elements of that defense are that you had effectively trained that employee, that you had rules and procedures that have been communicated in writing and so forth. Now guys, we cannot have a written procedure for everything. But increasingly I am finding, particularly as architects derive new and more fanciful designs, that we do need more written SOPs. Also, I'm finding, and write this down, because this is my chief message to Texans today, we have got to figure out to better document not the formal audits and safety inspections, but when a good superintendent, assistant superintendent, or other person is walking the site, either mainly for safety or more likely for other reasons, but to be able to show he was checking to see if tie-off points were proper. He was looking to see if there should have been barricades. It wasn't just, I'm dealing with the issue, because OSHA wants to see proof of that general oversight. Now, if you're also doing periodic, very thorough safety inspections of the site, that's even better, but you still need to figure out a way to document some of that day-to-day stuff. And that's particularly important when it's a small crew. You guys may be very large, but it may be routine for you to have crews of 5, 6, 7, 8 folks. And your foreman or your superintendent is probably working too. How is he supposed to effectively do that? And where's Bill? So I work, it turns out, I didn't know until recently, they do work for a lot of my clients and vice versa. And I know none of my clients use them to come in and do, I think, very good, periodic inspections of sites to give them just an extra eye. But I've talked to some of his folks about we have to figure out when it's small crews, how can we get documentation? Maybe it's, having an hourly site person who's given additional safety responsibilities. Because you're going to need this, if for nothing else, to be able to use defenses. Now, I want to flip that for a minute. You'll have a slide, and the slides are going to cover more than I am, and that's for a reason. And there's one section that says, think like a lawyer. OSHA has the responsibility. You may feel guilty until proven innocent, but OSHA has the responsibility to prove certain things. An applicable standard, employee exposure to a hazard, and this is the key part, and the employer knew or should have known of the hazard with the exercise of due diligence. And by employer, it means anyone supervising work. The knowledge of that lowest level supervisor is imputed to the company. Now, over the years, I've honestly had a fairly modest number of cases where somebody in supervision really did know about the rule breaking or unsafe work, and a lot of times those ended up as willful cases. But the reality is OSHA is usually having to prove you really should have known of this with exercise of due diligence. Now, what are some of the ways we would expect our supervisors to know of violations with the exercise of due diligence? Is that hand raising or are we scratching? Well, I have a problem with ears too, but nonetheless, bad movement on your part. It's like an option sold. So, what are some ways you show? Everybody else is going to go, I expected. What do you think some ways are that we could prove that we're acting with due diligence?
If you had inspection, safety meetings, training, documentation.
Stuff we know, right? But how often does it fall through? And how often do we rely? I'll tell you another example. Site and job specific training. You got a skilled carpenter, you got a skilled director, particularly if they're union. They have been extensively trained on their craft and probably extensively trained on fall protection. But are there different fall protection issues on a stick-built 4-story multifamily versus a bridge versus a high-rise construction? There are going to be very different fall protection issues between those. Very. Doesn't matter if the guy knows his craft's been trained before. There has to be some effort to document and give them site-specific training, including on fall protection. And you know what the corollary, the next level issue is, a lot of you guys, you have subs doing all that stuff. And if you don't know it, you do realize if you're a general contractor or if you are a sub who has a second tier, who then may even have a third tier sub, which sadly you may not know about even, and they act unsafely, they have an employee killed, OSHA sees their violation, there is some probability you're going to get cited too, either as a controlling employer or for various other reasons under the Act. So you have to put in steps, and I know it's hard, guys, particularly when you're in rural communities and all. Never mind finding really good subs, it's hard finding subs. And again, you know the deal of how often people are having to bring in other groups, and at some point some of those lower tier subs are basically Joe, a pickup truck, and his brother Daryl, Hoss, and Mike. I mean, It is not easy. But these are the things, whether it is Biden, Trump, or president to be named, we have to address. And it's like leadership training or being a business consultant. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but I guarantee you, you have me spend a while on any of your job sites, and I will find things that you think are being done that aren't being done. Now, how many folks here, I've talked to several folks that are in management here, how many folks are not in safety specific and are here because you're upper management? I met some folks earlier. See one, anyone else? These are folks that got to make it happen. I mean, we all know intuitively that if the leadership isn't serious, you know, picking up my buddy from Beck again, if I recall right, you report to the COO, right?
Yes.
Yeah. You're not going through 9 levels. You have their ear. Large client of mine that I think they'll probably turn about $10 billion this year, has 9 to 10 companies they operate under their names, already has a good reputation record, but a little over a year ago they formed a safety council to meet every quarter, and they meet in a different city and visit at least 2 job sites, and they are also under my efforts to protect it with attorney work product protections, doing a super involved audit throughout the country, employee interviews, so forth. And when they set this committee up, just so the CEO of the whole entity, the $10, $12 billion entity, knew people were serious, he's chairing it. And it'll be different next year. And then of these 10 or 11 companies, I think 3 of the members are president or CEOs of those companies, some regional executives, chief administrative officer, and then to make sure it's not totally bloated with just leadership, they picked what they call rising star, this really sharp Hispanic woman in New York City who's really just distinguishing herself now as a superintendent, and a couple of other lower-level folks. So we meet with them quarterly, and let me just tell you that there is no one in this gigantic entity now that thinks this company isn't serious, because they see these powerful people tramping around the jobs, asking questions, and I'll give them credit, and they are finding issues. But one thing they're further communicating, which they already communicated a lot, was this is just not the safety folks. If you think you can blow this off because it's the safety folks, you're very wrong. Then again, things we know, what are we doing? A couple other things that are coming. In addition to the whistleblower, the DOL has announced they are going to revitalize the thing where your full OSHA 300s will be submitted and they will be publicly viewable. That is going to happen this time. And I don't think they'll be able to block it by legal challenge, at least not indefinitely. There's a probably 50-page document that just popped up this week summarizing where they are in their heat illness standards. So it's moving along pretty fast. And as I said, we don't know if they'll be politicized or not. This anti-retaliation rule, remember all that silliness about when you could and couldn't drug test and having to have some level of cause to test and not testing automatically after accidents and such. And as you know, the position was moderated in the first few days of the Trump administration. It has been announced and it is formally documented they are going to bring that back in some fashion, which further complicates the whole issue of how to handle drugs and marijuana in the workplace. And you can remember some of the provisions of it. But I want to jump off from that and talk about something else. Sorry. So, how many of you guys are worried about how to handle marijuana? New York just this week passed a new rule that you can't drug test someone because they smell pot, which has traditionally been one of the reasons most people would say there's good reason to test. When the medical and recreational marijuana laws were first being passed, even in California and even in Colorado, which was one of the first, they clearly said unequivocally unequivocally, this does not mean an employer cannot refuse to hire or discharge someone for testing positive for marijuana. And so most of these laws, until about 2 years ago, had that provision. And because the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, expressly says if you test positive, then you are not protected by that anti-discrimination law. Basically, employers did not have to worry, regardless of state law, about whether they fired someone for testing positive for marijuana. And in construction, that's a good thing. Regardless of what one thinks about marijuana usage, whether it should be legalized, etc., honestly, I don't care. What I care about is, for 25 years, it has been confirmed that someone can have the metabolites present in their system, their speech can be normal, their gait, the way they walk, all these things can be normal, and quote unquote, their higher reflexes and judgment are affected. And it's not like alcohol where you have a recognized BAC or breath level that is treated as presumed impaired. Employers really have no choice but to test to prevent people from potentially being impaired by marijuana use. And sadly, unlike alcohol, its effects can last at least several days. So this is a point of great concern for construction employers. Some people are saying, oh, well, just test for safety-sensitive jobs. I'm trying really hard to think what jobs are not sort of safety-sensitive in construction. It's a tough issue. Well, a lot of the recent state laws started in New England, Maine, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, start expressly saying that an employer cannot terminate someone for testing positive for, usually it's medically used marijuana, unless you can prove that it constituted a direct threat. And what I will tell you is that does seem to be a trend. It will still be held somewhat, but it will be slowed so long as the federal government continues to treat marijuana as a Schedule I unlawful drug. And although the Democrats are pushing to change that, I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. What I would tell you is in your job descriptions, in your hazard analysis of jobs, your JHAs, whatever, put in provisions that you can later point to as a justification of why being impaired, even unperceptibly, would present safety hazards. And I don't mean mention marijuana, but I mean just in those job descriptions, in those analysis, set out reasons people are going to be exposed to struck bys, fall protection, even if they're not operating equipment and so forth. Because, for example, already in these New England states, when we get a challenge like this, that's what we do. We pull up and marshal our evidence and show, no, clearly a direct threat to safety. And we've had very good luck on this. So, other reason you need to do that is most job descriptions are more a fiction novel than a real thing. Rarely do I read one that's accurate. I love to give it to someone who's doing a really good job in that position and have them say, well, I can't do that. I don't do that. Good Lord, I have no idea why that's in there. Need to look at them anyway. But for those of you that are very nervous about these marijuana issues in the workplace, it's going to be, your risk level is going to be based on state law. But if you prepare, even in some of those states that are actively making you show a direct threat, you probably can. You can imagine how hard it is for a lot of other employers. All right, that works. Other issues that affect safety, again, burnout and so forth. And I want to poke on that second point. Don't show hands, but again, most of you, and I used to be the same way, kind of sniggered when people talk about culture. I'd be shown a value statement which was drafted by the executives or HR, which employees had no say in developing. And it wasn't real. And let's face it, every company has a culture. It's just a question of whether you work at it. We've got to start it. So I, a few weeks ago, spent a day at various regional locations of this very unglamorous but extremely well-run company that's quarries, ready-mix locations, and operates a lot of materials loading, tugs, barges on various rivers throughout the Southeast and the Midwest. And they handed out to me a book that they just developed on their culture. And they said, yeah, this used to be something we did just for our leadership people, but we spent all this time reworking it, and we're putting it out. And I'll admit, I was very glossy, and said, wow, it's really nice. I wonder if it's worth it. Didn't say that part. I'm here to tell you, my socks are knocked off. It reflected this company's strengths. They're still owned by a family, they've been around 100 years, and they had built a track record of concern for their employees they could rely on. And then they had training sessions, and I'm serious, they had figured it out. They had used their family ties, the fact that for years family members had been at various leadership levels and were known for appearing at a job site, if necessary, putting on their steel toes and their safety glasses and hard hat and getting involved. And it was powerful. And then, for example, when COVID was first heating up, they, before anyone else thought to, bought a slew of testing machines. You couldn't even get them, but they, for whatever reason, they just were heavily packed. And when they started testing employees, they also told their employees, hey, look, if you worry about your wife or kids come back from school, don't worry about it, brothers. Just send them to our employee health place. We'll test them for you. And then they were very generous in helping sick employees and doing this and doing that. So I'm meeting with these employees over the course of several weeks. These guys would walk the broken glass. And they leveraged their Ozark, Arkansas originated family business, supplemented by some pretty dang sophisticated systems, into their values. And then they have managed to avoid high turnover on really skilled people, particularly leadership. They invest a lot in training them. And it's no shock. This company is making a lot of money, doesn't have a lot of legal problems. And so now, though, COVID has just put not a stake in the heart, but it's done so much harm to our culture. Other things, if I could make one request of you, it's budget more money for regular supervisor training and development. We are increasingly asking frontline people to deal with difficult owners, companies, owners that change your schedule constantly, that screw the sequence up, with having to supervise an increasingly challenging workforce. We're asking them also to document better, and a lot of times we just don't even have enough supervisors. We have to train them because they're the ones that are going to cause the issues that we have then used against us under an increasingly aggressive administration. And again, we all know to do this, but we're not. And we could have a long discussion, which sadly we don't have time for, about how demanding owners are getting, and particularly in terms of screwing with your sequence, 7 days, a week work, and so forth. So I'm going to jump down because I want to cover a few inspection basics. And again, we'll make sure you get this set of slides, and you'll see that I haven't withheld all the good stuff. They are, by the way, even though I cut them down, this is slides that I usually do in 2 hours. But I wanted to be able to leave something for you guys. So, first, OSHA inspections are usually screwed up for again. A lot of people do not take OSHA seriously. For all the reasons I've said, we have to now. These are things that we have got to beforehand be ready. As I said, we either don't have a site safety plan or it's a form one, it's not specific, same for JSAs, AHAs, no formal walkarounds, documentation of the informal, inconsistent safety enforcement. We all know that on weekends and night shifts, you just don't have as much supervision. I have one large client that has done away with the work week. You work 5 days a week, but your weekend may be Thursday, Friday. Because they want to make sure on every day, including weekends, there are sort of the same number of administrative, safety, and other personnel. And that's just something they decided to do. Challenges with second-tier subs. no documentation of job and site-specific training, poor housekeeping. When you walk on a site, and we all know what poor housekeeping is, I don't need to define it for you, don't you then assume everything else is screwed up? So does the government. You can guarantee they're going to try and expand it. No OSHA inspection training. Imagine that. Because again, people don't worry about it so much. Some of the things that are done wrong, your opening conference when OSHA comes on site is an opportunity for you to set rules of the road, including what's going to be handled, how broad the inspection is going to be, and so forth. You don't have to just roll over. You have to be professional, and there are legal limits. Do not let OSHA intimidate you. And I still have compliance officers saying, I want all these documents before I leave here, or I'm going to note in the inspection report that you didn't have them. Well, honestly, that's not even lawful. And you sometimes have to make it clear that there's a lot of stuff they're asking for, and we've got to go through it, get it organized. There are exceptions. If they want your OSHA 300s, within 3 or 4 hours, that's okay. I mean, they're allowed to do that. But other things, you have the right to a reasonable time to pull it. Not prepping your supervisors before formal interviews. I have many clients that are very competent that handle most of their OSHA inspection process, but they generally involve me in either helping them prep supervisors or at least guiding the prep. Again, in most cases, you need a lawyer tramping around on site. But you do need someone who knows, and particularly like me, and there are others like me, I'm not unique, that have done a lot of this stuff. Other terrible things, either did the root cause analysis or accident report too soon. If it's a serious OSHA fatality or any OSHA fatality or particularly serious injury or various other things, you have to be careful, and usually I'll instruct a client, I can see now I'm causing feedback, to not put that in final form till we know more facts. And get your attorney involved if you're going to have one that is going to be more of a self-critical analysis, do it as a more protected document. The other thing is poor connection with corporate. Murphy's Law is that if you have a large job and your superintendent has been trained on handling OSHA, you have a site safety professional on that site, and you've got 1 or 2 other folks who have basic knowledge of how to deal with OSHA. When OSHA comes on site, Murphy's Law, all of you are out of town. So you've got to have some process so that everybody in leadership knows if OSHA or any government agency comes on site, immediately get corporate in the loop. And obviously if there's a fatality or something, even more so. I cannot tell you how often people find out OSHA came on a site, one of their sites, after OSHA's been there for 4 or 5 hours or was left. And your folks just have to understand that cannot happen. What happens, they come in, show credentials, we have the issue of warrant or no warrant. I cannot remember the last time I demanded a warrant. I have had a few occasions where we had to have a trained person or a safety professional on site before we felt comfortable with them. And I've told them that, and they'll tell you, well, we can't put it off on first visit. I understand, but it's going to take us 3 hours to get this person here. And more often than that, when we then contact them and say they're there, they will grumpily come on over, and usually there's no harm done. But I really don't want to have to demand a warrant, but if it is essential, you have some certain people on site to help with it, you got no choice. And usually you'll be able to resolve it such that they don't get a warrant, but you may sometimes have to say, we can't have a person here for 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours. There may be other times you're comfortable with it. But that is something you have to realistically deal with pretty regularly. Opening conference. I was in one recently where there's a ton of different employees on the site, and the assistant area director, this was in Texas, just tore into the GC wanting all these documentations of inspections, training, things that involve their management of subs. And I was startled, because that's not normally what comes up at an opening conference. Normally what comes up in an open conference is what's the corporate legal name, your tax ID, how many employees. Then they set out how they're going to approach the inspection. Well, this GC had an attorney there, and man, they were going at it hammer and tongs. And I was just sort of standing back going, well, you guys have fun. But I thought to myself, my God, this is a good GC. What have they done so hack off OSHA? Way into the process, I got to know the assistant area director really well. And he kind of confessed he had been too hot-headed, although the attorney on this side had been on too. He said, I actually wasn't trying to be disrespectful. It's just I've had all these cases with the employer. The GC ends up not having any of this stuff, and I wanted them to know I'm going to be wanting this. I said, well, next time you probably should explain that, because they just thought you had some grudge against them. So there are things that normally happen, don't happen within an open conference, but there needs to be one. And if there are a bunch of subs and contractors on site that open and visit, they need to be there, then generally OSHA will separate it out and kind of inspect by each employer. And if you're the GC or a sub, you want to make sure that, you guys communicate, everybody knows whenever OSHA's on site. So, basic things, and this is so important, not just the opening conference, but in the beginning of an inspection, is stick to confirmed facts. Don't speculate, don't recreate things. I mean, stick to the facts you know. You can always expand on as you learn more things. Common sense things about make sure the site's safe if it's an accident. We could talk a long time on site preservation and how to handle evidence. In fact, increasingly that's getting to be one of the biggest issues I have. As they walk around, you're supposed to be watching them, and you get debated on who should go and walk around. Sometimes it's your safety person. Other times you may want it to be an assistant superintendent. There are a lot of tactical reasons. But whoever's doing it, and they probably need someone to take notes for them, their role is to the large extent, see what OSHA's looking at. And when we say take pictures of things OSHA takes pictures of, the reason for that is the same reason you're watching them, is OSHA has to prove existence of hazard, applicable standard, employees were actually exposed, employer knew or should have known of the hazard. So actually taking the photos that they take is the lesser part of that. The bigger part of it is you want to get an idea of kind of where they're going and whether they're going right or wrong and the reasoning. In the discussion on incident investigation, there was a lot of talk about when to take photos, when not to take photos. Obviously if you take photos of what OSHA's taking photos of, that's an evidentiary issue, it's a little bit different. But even then, I have employers sometimes send me this plethora of photos they took, and they're all super close up, no context, no real understanding of what was happening. Again, there's a point in training on all this about how you document, how you determine how you're later going to challenge or maybe clarify if they're just totally out of left field. I want to make a point of something. If it's silica or other testing now, I've sort of gotten away from this, but I really mandate it again. If they're going to do testing, you're going to do side-by-side testing. And if you have to tell them, I can't get someone here to do the testing for 2 days, that's what you got to do. Because we have seen such grotesque, bad results from OSHA testing, and it's really not their fault. It's lack of budget, lack of good labs, and so forth. And a lot of times, your IH you bring in the test, we'll see them doing the wrong things and calibrating pumps and this, that, and the other. So I've swung all the way back to you're not testing, even if it angers you, unless I can be parallel testing. I find employers providing information and documents and not even keeping a list, and then I come in after the fact and go, you literally don't know what we provided them. So you've got to have some sort of documentation and list. It may be something you want to treat as my attorney work product, then do that. So you can loop and make it up. Or your counsel. And again, you can see these are things that allow things to go south.
Witness interviews, oh my gosh, guys. I teach an hour-long class on how to handle that. But I will tell you this, almost never are you going to let the supervisor sign a statement or initiative, because it's pretty much the same thing. Not because you're trying to play funny games with the government, but because even when you prep the supervisor, they don't know all the facts yet. You can have someone that seems full as a cucumber that just starts vomiting out info. Likewise, you can have someone that just doesn't want to explain things and just clams up. I almost never let supervisors sign witness statements. Employees, none of your business. Do not tell employees not to sign statements. When it gets to prepping employees for interviews, you really need to talk to counsel on that, because it is so easy to get afoul of OSHA and whistleblower stuff. Also, you have a right, you must exercise to sit in the supervisory interview. You have counsel do it. You do not with employees, even if they ask you to, you're not supposed to do it. And you will. You'll have employees that basically say, I hate the government, I'm uncomfortable. You still don't have the right, and it will really harm the investigation if you do that. So just so many things that can be screwed up on witness interviews. Closing conference is when OSHA, before giving the citation, tells you why they're going to cite. It's a non-event. They've been told not to debate. You just give as much information as you can about what they're going to cite you. And then informal conferences, I almost never skip them. They're all virtual right now, so I've been involved in a lot more of them than I used to be since I do it virtually. But there's a real art in what you're seeking in an informal conference. And increasingly in Texas particularly, and I've had this happen the last 2 years, I've had area directors just honestly tell me, Howard, there are a lot of complex legal issues in this. I see your point, I respect it, you're a good company, but I'm passing the buck. You and the lawyers work this out. You know, no acrimony, we're in agreement, but don't be surprised at that. In Texas, I generally don't resolve these things at the informal conference level. Now, if you have a total horrendous case and a leg to stand on, you know, you're not going to get a better deal just by saying, well, I'm going to contest it and go to the next stage. But I often come in and I find there are things that you may not have seen that we can get at a later stage. So I'm going to shut up with that. Again, I'll make sure you can get the slides, and as you can see, there's plenty of detail on them. And I have focused pretty heavily on things that go wrong. Because, again, we know penalties will be wrong. We know there's going to be more OSHA inspections. We know it is likely that DC will begin putting pressure on area offices to be political. We know this crap's going to happen. As to the ETS standard, there haven't been that many emergency temporary standards done. 50% of them have been legally blocked. Depending on how they make this one, and there's some chance it may be released this week, but no one knows for sure, but there is some chance. If it is too broad, it's more likely to be blocked. If it's more tailored and focused, like you notice, they did not block the healthcare employer one from X months ago because it was very narrowly tailored. So act as if, by golly, this thing is going to be effective in governing your lives potentially by end of December, but right now it's probably 50-50 chance that it'll be blocked. As to the government contractor mandates, those are far easier to defend in court, and I would anticipate those probably surviving. But as those of you who deal with the Davis-Bacon and Contract Services Act, all the government contractor stuff, know you really can get into the details and determine some employees may not be covered, certain contracts may not be covered. We're spending a lot of time on those issues before we get to compliance, but I think you're going to be stuck with those for a while. Whereas the ETS, 50-50 chance. I'm going to shut up now, but I'll be around today, maybe a little bit tomorrow. I don't want to throw you off schedule further, so like I said, I'll be happy to take questions if you guys can follow up with me. But I will be around, I will talk. As always, guys, it's a pleasure. And remember, go Braves.